جمال الوجود بذكر الإله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are going to start the next session, and the topic is navigating change, adaptive school governance. I'm going to introduce my guest speaker, but I want to introduce him with something else. Have you ever been captivated and then liberated to think, to act, and to reflect? I introduce to you Abdurrahman Sayyid. Abdurrahman Sayyid is the founder of Algebra with 2 decades of experience in brand communication strategy. Prior to Algebra, he has held key roles in strategy and marketing at the HSBC Group and Figure Capital, a Harvard graduate and visiting faculty member at KSBI. He has worked across finance, education, philanthropy, and frequently writes and speaks on storytelling, persuasion, and strategic planning. Abdurrahman splits his year between Dubai and Michigan, USA. He mentioned that this topic really requires due attention because we are living in difficult financial times, And beyond that, we find that navigating the challenge of school governance is very difficult, given the fact that there's a rise in the number of private institutions globally. I welcome Abdurrahman Sayyid.
We're going to start with a short journaling exercise. I'm going to ask you to do 2 things once you have a piece of paper and a writing utensil out. This is to get us in the zone, to get us on the same page. It's called a spiral journal because the first step is to draw a spiral, starting at the center, at the origin of the graph. Draw an x-axis, a y-axis. We're not going to do any geometry, don't worry. And start at the center and draw as tight as you can a spiral for a full minute. Brother Abdullah, can you count start and stop? For a full minute, for 60 seconds, all we're going to do is as tightly as possible, starting in the center of your chart, draw a spiral. And then you're going to answer 4 questions. Brother Abdullah, I know you're drawing. Are you also keeping track of the time? Oh. So we're good. I want you to answer 4 questions. You can stop drawing if you like, yes, and you can switch to these questions. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's stop, people. Thank you.
How I feel today. What I hope to take from this session. Brother Abid is writing in his mind. How I feel today. What I hope to take from this session. How does our board run our organization? The organization may be a school, but it need not be. How does our board run our organization? Finally, is it working? Why or why not? Brother Abdullah, can you give us 5 minutes for this? We're going to spend the next 5 minutes from when he says start to when he says stop for these 4 questions. Yes. How do I feel today? What do I hope to take from this session? How does our board run our organization? This may require some reflection. Is it working? Why or why not? We have time on the clock, but if you're one of those who need to stop quickly, the next task will be to identify someone next to you with whom you do not currently work. you should be sitting next to someone with whom you do not work. So not from your organization, not from your group. Keep going. Oh, we're at 3 minutes now. You still have 2 more minutes. So just make sure at the table you pair up with someone who's not from your organization. If you need to get up and sit somewhere else, please do. Whichever organization you are trying to solve for, your partner should not be from that same organization. It's been 5 minutes. We've used 6 minutes now, 1 minute for the spiral and 5 for our reflection, in order to get into the zone. We're not starting a discussion. I know you wrote something down, but I haven't asked you to discuss it. I just asked you to sit with someone with whom you will be able to discuss it later. I would like to turn to our learning objectives and then share a few thoughts before we return to what you've just written down. Okay? So this is the raw material, but we need to develop it and refine it a little bit before we discuss it with our new friends. So what are our learning objectives for today? In the next 50 to 55 minutes, I have 4 objectives for us. The first, which we've already begun, is to reflect on your own organization. And I encourage those of us who are so busy and successful that we are working with 4, 6, or 12 organizations to pick one. Pick one organization for the purpose of this session in order to focus on, in order to solve for. So the first learning objective is to reflect on how this organization that you have picked is governed. And then for my part, my contribution to this session will be to share 2 key elements of board governance: how boards engage with schools and how boards make decisions. And then finally, by the end of the session, I will ask you to commit in your own organization what your next steps, your 15%, will be. Okay? So those are our 4 learning objectives. Reflect, learn, commit. Now, when I talk about education, it takes me back to school. Because before I was a consultant, I was, many years ago, a teacher, and before I was a teacher, I was, for many years, a student. And we're all first students and still students. And in preparing for this session, my mind went back to my high school English class at the Karachi American School with Ms. Rosalind Gilland, from whom I first learned about the aesthetic principle of balance. Balance, she said, is repetition with a difference. As an aesthetic principle, balance, she said, is repetition with a difference. I believe it was in the context or in connection with Samuel Beckett, his play Waiting for Godot. Now, Samuel Beckett was a 20th century American playwright. He wrote a play called Waiting for Godot. It's a 2-act play in which the characters are the same and the outcome is essentially the same. And yet, Act 2 follows Act 1 with minor variations in the details. Now, I won't go further into it, but she used that to talk to us about balance. The 2 acts were not identical, and they were not different. They were balanced because Act 2 repeated Act 1 with a difference. Or to take another example from my study in philosophy, the 6th century BC Greek philosopher Heraclitus is recorded to have said that you cannot step in the same river twice. It's a different expression of a similar idea. You cannot step in the same river twice. The river is the same, but the water is not. The moment keeps changing, and yet there is continuity. The moment is changing, and yet there is continuity. Now, why am I sharing these examples? These are different ways to give you on-ramps to the theme of our conference, which is tajdeed, or renewal. Right? Because renewal is the effort to embrace the change while returning to first principles. Change is a constant. So tajdeed, like the river, is both change and continuity. It's balance. It's repetition with a difference. Now, what does that have to do with our topic today? Simply put, the idea, if you take one with you today, is that governance of any organization is tajdeed in institutional form. In order to govern an organization effectively, we must embrace the idea of tajdeed, the idea of balance, of change and continuity. Governance is tajdeed in institutional form. Now, we know this from our own tradition. We know this from the Quran. We know this from the Sunnah. We know that at the human level, the Quran tells us that with hardship comes ease. With constriction comes expansion. With sabr and shukr. Right? At the human level, for the believer, our reality is not linear, but rather cyclical. And so it is at the social level. The Quran also teaches us that Allah rotates the days among the people. In the Quran, it's in the context of the Battle of Uhud, I believe. But we are living this today. Those of us who are following the events of the world are in this suspension, right? Which day is for the believers, which day is against the believers. So both at the individual level and at the social level, we are given to understand that the world of creation is cyclical. So it is in nature, and so it is in human nature. And we perpetually forget this because we are so enamored by the sciences that we think in lines. We're run by engineers, with the apologies to the engineers in the audience. We think in lines, we think in formulas, we think in yes, no binaries. We want the fixed, the right, and the only formula for success in any situation. And yet a more organic understanding of our condition, both natural and social, will help us embrace with greater flexibility the moment so that we can review what is before us, choose from among the options while holding on to first principles. With this background in mind, if you consider a school is not a thing. A school is an organism. And like an organism, it grows and it dies. It follows a particular life cycle. Right? I'm trying to get us to shift our mental model. Yeah? Instead of lines, let's begin to think in circles. You have the seeds of a school in the minds of our founders, in the first conversations of that voluntary board that is staying up late at night and not quite sure what it's doing. Before that first brick is laid, many hours are spent right here at this stage. This too is a school. And then when you have the first years, pre-K, kindergarten, first, this bloom of youth where the baby is still cute and you don't yet have growing pains and people are not yet bored with what are we doing and why am I not paid? This too is a school. And then inshallah, when you succeed in your initial efforts and you're able to institutionalize and bring on a professional workforce and have a strong leader and have a track record and the students are coming in and the parents are coming in, mashallah, you have a mature tree of a school. And this too is a school. But again, it's not linear. You have setbacks. Back, forth. You have disasters. And then you must readapt and begin again. So organizations follow a life cycle. Right? This is the mental model that I'd like us to adopt when we think of governance in the spirit of Tajdeed. So I said I would focus on two areas, yeah? How boards engage with schools and how boards make decisions. So let's take each. Again, when I share with you how a board carries out its responsibilities, you will see options here and not a recommendation. Right? From least involved to most involved, as a board, we might follow the leadership of the school. We might monitor the school team. We might partner with or intervene or dictate. Someone might describe us, if they were to step away from the meetings, as a passive board. For good reason or bad, we let the management take the lead. The management sets the vision, the management sets the strategy, the management sets the policies. If we meet, we don't meet independently of management because the management is driving the agenda just as the management is operating the school. When we meet at the request of the management and following the lead of the head of the school. Now, if we shift down the scale a little bit, we might be in monitoring mode. Sure, we've got a great management, we trust them, and yet in order to do our job, there's certain independence and there's a certain level of supervision that we must commit to separately from the management. So the certifying board will review and check, ask questions, evaluate performance, maybe have independent directors, and they may meet and act independently of the management. Now this is in the middle. It doesn't mean that this is the ideal. But somewhere in the middle you have a partnering board where the management and the board act hand in hand. There's a clear allocation of roles and responsibilities, and there's a two-way conversation between the two sides of the group. Some boards are not satisfied with that. They feel they need to intervene, either because it's too early, or we've just lost a key person, or we are going through a crisis. So on certain key issues, we step into operational matters, and we have more frequent intense meetings, often at short notice. And for those of us who either don't have a management or a management that we trust, we might say everything comes from the board and everything stays with the board. Yeah. The first and the last. It's an operating board. It runs the school, and management reports to it. The key decisions across all levels are made by the board, and the role of the management is to implement those decisions, perhaps to relay feedback from the staff or from parents and teachers, but not to make the decisions, in which case the rhythm of the governance remains with the board. So I just laid out 5 different models for you. Our purpose here is not to discuss the models, although we have worksheets for you as takeaways. Yeah? My purpose of sharing this is to show you the possibilities that are available, and then to ask you to reflect on what I said just before. All right? When you are thinking about your organization, you might ask yourself, are we a 3? Should we be? Are we a 5? Is it time to move to a 4? All right? Have we too long been a 1 and we need to step back into a 2? I cannot answer those questions for you. I'm a consultant, I do this for a living. But I don't have the facts that you do. There is no one right answer here. Right? So in the spirit of Tajdeed, I want you to focus not on the right answer, but the best answer. Yeah. And this is something, a muhasabah, you can do now, and this is one that you can do annually. This is something you can do when you begin a board, and then when you review the performance of the board. When you hire management and when you review the performance of the management. It's worth asking, what number are we at? What number should we be at? And how do we step across the gap? Yeah? We have a worksheet for you for that. Not for this session, but as a takeaway. Now, this does not mean that anything goes. Change and continuity. Tajdeed is not drift. In fact, the role of the board is to prevent mission drift. Right? So what are the first principles to which we must always return, regardless of which path we choose? And one way to think about first principles when it comes to governance, especially how the board relates to this school, is to consider your core duties. What are the duties to which you will be answerable by law when you sign up to be a director of a school? Now, you can apply different lenses. There's a US nonprofit lens, which I've applied here, because in my work with CISNA, that's the point of view we took. But then if you consider other common law jurisdictions, the duties are similar. Civil law jurisdictions, there's minor variations as well. So in mature, developed markets, developed, quote unquote, all right, you have a sense of three duties: a duty of care, a duty of obedience, and a duty of loyalty. So these are the first principles to which we should return, regardless of the path that we take. Are we carrying out our duty of care? Are we paying attention to the institution's activities and operations and preventing it from drifting away from its mission? Now, if you apply an Islamic lens, there's more to it. All right? It's not simply the mandate of the school as according to the law of the land. We should also be paying attention to society and the environment in the spirit of khilafah. When you look at the US nonprofit regulation, you're not going to find khilafah. But in a room of Muslims, we need to consider what's the Islamic lens. What's that first principle to which we should return, regardless of the path we take? The duty of obedience is to comply with the applicable laws and the bylaws and adherence to the mission. Islamically, the mind immediately goes to the Sharia. We must make sure not only are we fulfilling the laws of the land, but the laws of the Lord. And then there's a duty of loyalty, where you put the interests of the institution before your own. And this is typically in doing a conflict of interest check, or to step away from the meeting if you are personally involved. If we are hiring my wife, then I can't be part of the conversation, right? So this is known, this is understood. But as Muslims, we can't stop there. We must have a loyalty framework, a loyalty paradigm that extends beyond the school to the community, beyond the community to the ummah, and beyond the ummah to Allah. So khilafah, sharia, wala. These are the first principles to which we should return when it comes to governance, regardless of the path we take. Yeah? Okay. My mouth is dry, you're either engaged or bored, and we're going to take a pause. I'm going to cover two things, right? How the board relates to the school, which we just covered, and how the board makes decisions. Before we get to how the board makes decisions, let's return to the exercise we started. Okay? We'll take either 5 minutes or 10, and it'll be up to you. At the end of 5 minutes, Brother Abdullah is going to ask, shall we continue with the session, or should we take 5 more minutes? Okay? So I ask you to pick a partner, not from your group. I would like, of the two, let's say one is A and one is B. I want A, you pick who A is, to tell B what their answers were. Okay? Let's take 10 minutes for this. I think it's worth 10 minutes. For the first 5 minutes, you explain your answers. In particular, answers 3 and 4, right? How does our board govern our organization? Is it working? Why or why not? Take 5 minutes to explain the situation, to go into any problems. B, please ask open-ended questions to understand. And then we switch to 5 minutes. For the second 5 minutes, B, in the light of the slides here, will give some nasiha to A. Well, have you considered X? Why not think of Y? Which stage are you at? Which stage do you want to be? And which first principle are you committing to or missing? Yeah? So 5 plus 5, A and B, not from the same organization. If you have questions, just raise your hand and Brother Abdullah or I will come to you. Starting. The benefit of a 3-4 day conference is that you will have more opportunities to speak. As they say, I reclaim my time. So I didn't share the slide before, let me do that now. On the same topic. I'm being asked to speak louder. Is that better? Okay. So we can visualize the same duties. The first principles in nonprofit regulatory language, duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. If you think of these as 3 points to a triangle, as Muslims we can expand our concern. This is a narrow definition of the letter of the law. But if we expand our concern with our Islamic lens, we see visually what I was sharing on the previous slide. Where there is duty of care simply, there can also be a sense of khilafah. Where there's a duty of obedience narrowly, there can also be the imperative sharia. And where the duty of loyalty is simply to the institution, we can extend it with the principle of wala. Khilafah, sharia, wala. The first principles to which you should return, so that at that annual check, when you ask, how are we doing as a board? Oh, we moved from 5 to 4, it was a good move, great. What about sharia? What about wala? What about khilafah? Did we trip up on any of the first principles? And if we are changing anything in our governance, let's make sure that it's around these and not at the expense of these. Okay? So that's the balance. Yeah? So let's turn to how boards make decisions. So in my work, I will sometimes advise on strategy and less often on governance. And even though governance is less frequently what I'm asked to help with, the reason it's so critical is that regardless of how good your strategy is, how neat your playbook is, if you've gone through all the exercises, if the people making the decisions are unable to act effectively, then your organization is going nowhere. Right? Strategy lies in the execution. And if the execution lies with the board, and if the board is unable to act, or keeps fumbling, all right, then we need to fix the problem somewhere else. This is why it's so important to get not only our decisions right, but our decision-making right. And in the same spirit, I'm not suggesting what's the right way to make a decision. But with the zaman and the makan, what is the best way to make a decision? We're going to apply the same analysis. So again, there's a spectrum here. Some boards are enamored with democracy and consensus and equity and inclusion and say, we will make every decision together. And someone get the coffee and someone get the dates because we're going to be here all night. And I've worked with organizations like that. Every decision is with the board, and every decision requires us to convince everybody who's at the table. And sometimes I ask my clients, who gave each of these people a seat at this table? Because you made that decision at some point, explicitly or implicitly. Yeah. So at one end of the spectrum is consensus. Every decision will be made by everybody. And at the other end, you have a top-down approach. Who's the emir? Find me the emir, and he'll make the decision. Khalas. Everyone feed into the emir and let him make a decision, and we'll move on. That's top-down. And these are both quite common when it comes to nonprofits. Right? We have organizations that are around personalities, and we have our organizations that are around conversations. And both have their benefits and both have their dysfunctions, as all of you have more experience than I. And then there's also two in between, so we'll walk through them. So consensus can be visualized as a circle. Right? No corners, but also no direction. Top down, the hierarchy is clear. We know who we report to. All right? But at what expense? And then you can mix and match these shapes a little bit. You could have a decentralized model where, yes, as a whole, the different parts are roughly equal, and when we get to the board level, the subcommittees need to convince one another before something goes through. But within the subcommittees, it's a hierarchy. Each subcommittee has a very clear line, right? The Amir or Amira is clear, all right? They're charged with a mandate. They make a decision, they get it ratified by the board. Okay, so this is a hybrid model. Or you could have a layered approach. Just flip the decision making. That among the committees we'll have all the conversations. And make sure everyone in the committee signs off on it, so that when it goes to the board and the board says, any issues? Nope, we sorted out all the issues. Right? And then now we're coming to the board for a decision. The decision is still with the board, it's not with the committee. The committee is making a recommendation, the recommendation is a unanimous recommendation, but the decision is a singular decision. Because in this layered approach, it's still top down, up top, and it's consensus below. Yeah? So just with some triangles and circles, we can flesh out different ways that we can make decisions. What's the right way? What's the best way? We have 10 minutes to the session, and I'm going to leave 5 for questions and comments. Yeah? What about first principles, Abdurrahman? You said we have options, but then what are the first principles? I'm suggesting 3. This is what I call the diamond model. It's not my own. You can see for each of the slides, I've sourced where I've done the adaptation from. In the diamond model, it seems very simple, but it's very flexible. The first thing you do is you decide the roles. Regardless of the way that you make the decision, as a first principle, I should know where I stand. Do I have a seat at this table? Am I a yes man? Am I here for advice? If you know RACI, recommend, approve, consult, inform. Right? The RACI matrix is a way to achieve this. Everyone knows what their place is and what their role is. Make that clear up front. And then take input from the people that you need to take input in order to make that decision. And then make the decision. 1, 2, 3. It's a diamond shape because it begins narrow with great specificity. Then it opens up to take input. You start narrow with specificity. Hey, whose decision is this? Is this your decision? No. Is this your decision? No. Is it my decision? It's your decision. Okay. Now, how are you going to take input? And then, how are you going to bring it to a close? And in any of those pathways, you can follow 1, 2, 3 for any of these. But be clear on what 1 is, what 2 is, and what 3 is. Imara, istishara, istikhara. If you look at your bylaws, please do not spend 2 months on your bylaws. Just make sure that these 3 things are there. First principles. Who's the Amir? It doesn't have to be the Amir of the organization. It could be the Amir of this decision. What form will the shura take? From whom will he or she take the shura? And how will they take the shura? And then how will we bring it to a close? Not excluding istikhara. Yeah? Imara, istishara, istikhara. Tajdeed is renewal. It's a nice word. Right? How do we put it in institutional form? The answer is governance. Not the right governance for all times, but the best governance for the moment. So if we're talking about organizations as a life cycle, I want to end with an organic metaphor that is from the hadith literature. In Sahih Muslim and elsewhere, there are multiple variations of this hadith. I love this hadith. Yeah. And the different variations where it says hypocrite, in one case it's munafiq, in one case it's fasiq, in the third case, I don't want to say because I don't remember accurately. But in any case, the believer is likened to the opposite of believer, whether it's a fasiq or a munafiq, or perhaps a disbeliever. Wallahu alam. The likeness of the believer, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us, is that of a green stalk of crop, a sapling, a tender green plant. The wind bends it this way and that. The wind is musibah. When a musibah strikes him, like the wind, the crop bends this way and that. But it always rises again. And the hypocrite is like a cedar tree, firm, strong, that stands rigid until it's uprooted. So in the spirit of tajdeed, in the spirit of balance, in the spirit of repetition with the difference, of not stepping in the same river twice, of maintaining change together with continuity, optionality with first principles. Let us be like the green stalk and not like the cedar tree. I'll end here. We have 5 minutes, I think, for questions or comments. The way that I suggested, Brother Abdullah, is people love to give comments in the form of questions. So if you have a question, let's start with a question, and then we'll go to a comment. And if it's a comment, please make the comment rooted in the conversation that you had. And then we'll go back to a question, and then a comment. I think we have room for 4. Question, comment, question, comment. I don't know if we have a mic, so please, if you're speaking, either raise your hand for a mic or speak more loudly than I am used to. Oh, okay, great. There's one mic there, and okay. So, we have a question? Please. You see, you began your question with Islamically, which means you disqualified me from giving you a response. I can't tell you Islamically. I'm a Muslim trying to understand our frameworks and their frameworks and putting them together. But when you say Islamically, I think there are others in the audience who can answer better than I can. Yeah. This is not the final word. This is a conversation. Yeah? Let's not pretend otherwise. Yes?
Yeah.
Comment.
No, it's a question.
We need a comment.
Okay.
For the commenters in the audience, if you can share something, if you thought that you had a rich conversation that's worth sharing with the room, this is your opportunity. Would someone like to share a comment from their group? In the back, please come to the mic here. And then, brother, we'll go, actually, I'll reserve the question for the sisters. If they don't, then I'll come to you. So we have a commenter approaching the mic. In advance, from among our sisters, is there anyone who has a question or a comment? Please raise your hand. Okay. Yes.
Firstly, Jazakallah khair for a wonderful presentation. A comment that I have, and I'd love to get advice from people who are here, and perhaps yourself, is sometimes the misalignment between school principals and school boards in terms of operational matters, which can be perceived as being contrary to school vision and mission.
Yeah.
If I can give a very simple
Please.
example in my scenario,
Yes.
where we may want to have a more prophetic approach to dealing with school discipline, looking at restorative practices where the teachers are trained and on board, but sometimes parent bodies or school boards who are not always actively involved day to day with the school, all they're seeing is children are misbehaving and there's no consequence. And it can appear as a failing of school leadership. So it wasn't really a question, but just more of a comment, and probably seeking a bit of advice if any others in the room may be experiencing something similar.
If you could introduce yourself, your name and your organization so that people can find you later.
Sure. My name's Osman Karalia. I'm principal of Arcana College in Sydney in Australia. And I'm also the Vice President of the Islamic Schools Association of Australia.
Excellent. Thank you for your comment, brother.
Jazakallah khair, thank you.
I don't see a question from this side of the room. Going once. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hashim. I'm a board member of International Islamic School, Osaka, Tokyo, Japan. So my question is, most of the time when we heard about this kind of theories or proposals, like 5 different forms of governance,
Yeah.
it's always come up with certain data background that suggests, okay, this could be the best, this could be the normal one.
Yeah.
Any of these your proposals or probably adapted from somewhere else, is it supported by some kind of data that suggests number 3 is best, number 4 is not, something like?
That's a great question. It goes against the spirit of my comments because I'm suggesting you pick what's appropriate to the occasion as opposed to ask what the right answer is. But it's a good question nonetheless. I commit to following up because the article from which I adapted that particular framework, I believe was in the Harvard Business Review. I can check the article, I can check the author to see if there's data that backs one model over another. Yeah? So just find me afterwards. I don't know at the moment. Yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes we're too enamored by data, but the question is valid nonetheless. Okay. We have time for one comment. If not, yes, okay. Brother Abdullah, if we can share the worksheets.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa
I
rahmatullah.
am Rukia from South Africa. We were also in a very similar situation before this year. Our board was never on site, so it was very difficult to communicate, and we always felt that the miscommunication caused a lot of major problems and challenges. But this year, our board members are on site. And we found that when that relationship works out, everything is much happier. Staff is much happier. There's no miscommunication. And obviously, our SMTN management also are able to communicate openly so that if there are any miscommunications, it's eradicated immediately.
Yeah.
So that's one solution that we found worked for us at Johannesburg Muslim School in South Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's, I think, a very astute observation that we can attest to, in my experience. On-site beats off-site. Okay. Yeah. Oh, 1 second. I need 2 more minutes. Yeah. So where does that leave us? I began the wrap-up. Let me just share a couple more slides. We have worksheets that you can use as takeaways. You can diagnose where you are in your relationship as an organization and where you want to be. If they're not enough for everybody, then of course you can follow up with my colleague Zainab. Zainab, if you can stand up, please. So my colleague Zainab and I are here for the rest of the conference. We also have a table in the hall. We have worksheets on both topics: how to relate to the school and how to make a decision. And then the final learning outcome for you, there will be a soft copy of this, is to consider what's your next step. What's your 15%? Where you have freedom to act. You're not responsible for the whole organization, perhaps. Where you have freedom to act with respect to the governance of your school, what can you do? Without further resources, without further authority. Don't tell me, make me Amir and then we'll talk. With the resources and authority do you have, what can you do with this session as a next step in your organization? That's a commitment that I want you to make to yourself. And these slides will be with you. I shared a bit on algebra, our firm, and I committed to our client in this space, well, our most recent client, with all compliments to GAIS, which is also an algebra client. Our most recent client in this space, Renewal Education, they just launched their Launch Good campaign, and I told them that I would share it with you. You can follow up with us for details. Thank you.
Jazakallah to a very interactive audience. I must say it was productive, it was introspective and reflective, and we have a lot to go home with to engage with people in authority and those with whom we can engage and bring change to our school. Jazakallah khair. It is now the time for tea and asr. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.